Today's video is going to be on bending and how to get the technique right in particular, but also a bunch of things to practice while you are trying to get this under your fingers. Now, bending is quite a surprising topic for me because personally I don't think it's that difficult to do, but what I have noticed is that a lot of people get the wrong end of the stick from how people are trying to teach this, particularly on YouTube, because there's a bit of a misdirection in terms of what's actually going on when someone tells you to twist into a bend. And that's not really how we should think about it. So off the guitar before we start, because I like to always try and get people to do things first without the guitar in their hands, just so they get the feeling down. The reason why people describe it as a twisting motion is if you actually do this, if you try and twist up and down like this with your hand, you will find that that motion is controlled by the bicep, right? You can feel it here as you twist upwards. You can feel this part of your bicep sort of engage as that happens. So the whole point of getting people to try and think about a twisting motion is not to try and do it from the wrist. It's to try and use the bigger muscles in the arm to get the job done, right? Bending requires force. It's one of the very few things on guitar where you can't have a light touch. You need to physically displace a string. And so what we want to do is use bigger muscles to displace that string. We don't want to be using the finger muscles because the finger muscles are weak. We don't want to be using the wrist because the wrist muscles are weak. We want to be using the bicep to do this. And that is one of the big sticking points for most people, is that they try and think about this as a turning motion and not a bicep engagement option. So what I will do is I'll now switch my camera over to my guitar and I will show you what that looks like, because it's really important to see it as well as actually feel it. Right, so what do I mean about bicep engagement? If you think about your arm literally moving from here to here, this is one of these motions where you can lift a lot of weight, and you should know that from the gym, or you know that if you've ever picked up a weight of some kind. This is pretty much as much force as you're going to get out of that arm, because it's pretty optimized in terms of how it moves. So bearing that in mind, when we put our hands on the instrument, if we can use some of this upwards force to get these bends done, then we're going to make life a lot easier for ourselves. So here we go with problem number one with a lot of people when it comes to bending. What they often do is they'll try and bend, but they sort of follow the natural curve of the hand. And what that does is force them into the fretboard. So bending fundamentally pushes the string upwards. And that's what we're trying to achieve here. So one of the things I want you to try is just put your finger directly under the string. Don't worry about making any noise here. And literally just push the string straight up. And don't worry about fretting it. You're not trying to fret it. Just push the string straight up and then play it at the top. And most of the time, if you've got your guitar set up well, that will actually fret a note with no inwards force at all. I'm purely trying to push that string upwards. So that's the first thing to get used to, is are you pushing into the fretboard too much? Are you using the curl of the hand and sort of curling your hand into the fretboard and then making things too tense, and then you're having a real problem actually pushing the string upwards? Now, second thing is, if I do what I said I was doing at the beginning of this video, and I take a string and I just move my whole hand upwards like this, you see how far I can move that string? That's no force required, right? I'm literally just locking my fingers and using the bicep to do that. So that's another really important thing, is that this sort of wrist turning motion, I think, is a little bit shit, to be honest, because nobody really... That's not really getting you a lot of force behind that. Whereas if you just think of it as use the bicep, move the hand straight up. We can immediately just start to really get a lot of force behind that, and the force is what we need to bend and displace those strings. So bear in mind, different string gauges, this is going to be a little bit more difficult one. I'm obviously playing on a pretty light string gauge here, so it's a little bit easier for me. I often overbend things by accident if I'm going to mess up my bends, just purely because of the fact that I'm playing on a pretty light string set. So one of the things to try is just try and get this feeling of, don't worry about the pitch for now, just pushing the string straight up and trying to sort of do this with your bicep, not with the twisting, not with the fingers, anything like that. Just fret note. And you can really see, if you can see here what's going on, you can see that motion if I give you this camera angle. So that's the first thing. You just like get used to that. Don't try and get used to the pitch. Just get used to the feeling of actually using the bigger muscles in the arm. Now, the next thing you got to do is actually pitch it properly, which is the challenge here. That's the thing. When you use bigger muscles, the slight problem with it is that they are a little bit more inaccurate. So you've got to learn how this feels. And again, that's the kicker here. What I just said is it's a feeling, not really a pitch thing. So bending is often misconstrued as, oh, well, you need to be able to hear that. And that's true to an extent. You do use your ears to pitch things to some extent, but the other thing that helps you here is muscle memory. So it's being able to go all over the neck and know that this tone bend feels like that much tension. And if I do, and then I know what that actually feels like before I've even bent, and I know how to get there very, very quickly. So again, there is a bit of a muscle memory thing here going on with all the strings on the guitar on all the frets, which takes some time to learn, don't get me wrong. So a great way of learning all of this is picking a key and trying to improvise in it. And just really trying to over-egg the bends, like just use like loads and loads and loads and loads of bends in all of your playing there. Don't worry about the phrasing, it's going to sound a bit excessive and a bit weird, but the whole point is I'm just trying to explore the fretboard, and that was just like an A minor pentatonic thing, explore the fretboard a bit, and then put a bend in like every 2 notes. And that just really allows me to learn this muscle memory while doing something a little bit more fun, because you can still pitch it, you can still work on your technique, but it just helps you a little bit to really get these things under your fingers. So that's the first thing with this, is just explore the neck, use the bicep to do those bends, and really make sure that you're sort of semi-locking the fingers. It doesn't matter if the fingers move a little bit when you're bending. Again, that's not something that the internet tells you is good, but to be honest, I've seen a lot of players sort of bend with a very slightly lengthened finger. But the whole point is, even if the fingers move, the fingers are able to move because they're not actually responsible for the force. The force is coming from the bigger muscles. So just bear that in mind if you are doing this. Thumb position plays a big role here. It's very, very difficult to bend with a very classical thumb position, and this should be quite obvious, but some people try this. If you put your thumb on the back of the guitar, like let's say like halfway between your second and first finger, like a very sort of classical thing, these bends, you can see I can't even do this. My thumb autopilots to the top of the neck here because it's just easier. It's easier to get this going on when the thumb's not sort of stuck to the back of the neck. So I prefer the thumb over the top. And like, again, just really trying to over-egg some of these bends as well. See how far you can do that with. And the reason I can get that much force onto an A string, there's a Guthrie Govan video where he does something stupid like that, and everyone's probably seen it. The reason he's able to do it is again, it's like a pull down from the whole arm. It's not the finger sort of bending that on its own. You just don't have the capability to do that. So just make sure that your technique is all sort of bigger muscles here. So that's the first thing with sort of all of your bends and working through all of those. Now, other things to be aware of here is that, again, this is one of the reasons why in my setup video I said there's no point playing on an action above 2.5 mil. If you try and do some of these bigger bends like that on an action on 2.5 mil or more, you'll just break the string in half. And I've done that many times. And this is why it's sort of pointless with these high actions. They come with so many downsides. And one of them is that your risk of breaking strings on a very high action is enormous. So, you know, why would you take that risk, particularly as a professional, if you're going and getting paid to play music? Why would you set up your guitar like some kind of ticking time bomb that's just going to break all the strings at some point during your gig? That sounds like a really bad idea to me, and a bad idea to most professional guitarists. So again, high actions, something to bin here, because it makes your life harder and also just puts you at a massive risk of breaking all of your strings when you're doing this. Hopefully this video has been helpful. Bit of a short one today, but this is a topic that I think people get wrong a lot, and hopefully this helps you just navigate a few things on the neck. Give that a go.